Hello everyone. For this second video, I'm going to show you how to make a sphere again, but this time we're going to apply color. With the grayscale, we figured out how to label our layers. We used the brushes and opacity and tried to create smooth transitions. Now we're going to add this element of color. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to make another new document. I'm going to name it my name, G, grade, and color, sphere. I'm going to make sure that it's print. Let's do print and letter. And I want to switch it from being a portrait to a horizontal, a landscape. And it's just this button right here. So now I'm going to click on create, and here it is. So again, just like with the color sphere, we're going to start with making a new layer, and we're going to call it base, and this is where we're going to draw our actual shapes. And we're going to grab the Ellipse marquee tool, Ellipse select, and then I'm going to click, drag, and hold the shift key down. Remember, holding the shift key allows it to stay a perfect circle. And there it is. So now I need to pick a color, which is the fun part. So I'm going to grab the bucket tool, and it's underneath the gradient tool. If you click and hold on the gradient tool, you get the paint bucket tool. And it literally looks like a paint bucket being knocked over. And then what you're going to do is you're going to come up to color, and you're going to pick a color. If you don't have this color window up, you can actually go up to your menu. You can go under Window and Color, and it will open this window for you here. So you can have more selections than if it was just the swatches. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to choose a color, maybe a little light blue-green, and I can see the color change in this top box, and it's changing over here. And now I'm going to click, and that would be the color of my object. So I can keep going until I find something that I like. And then once you're done, you're going to hit Control D, and it deselects it. So just like with the grayscale one, then our next move is to make all of our new layers. So I'm going to make a new layer, and the first one's going to be called shadow, right? The part that is starting to get darker as it's being hidden from the light source. Core shadow, which is the darkest shadow, the darkest point in the shadow. Now I'm going to go to my highlight, which is the brightest part on my object that the light's hitting. And then my reflected light, which is reflected up from the surface that it's sitting on. And then remember, underneath the base is where we're going to put the cast shadow, because the cast shadow is underneath our object. Our objects are sitting on it. Now, shadow, core shadow, highlight, all need to become clipping masks. Because remember, we want to paint our highlights and our shadows inside our base shape and color. So applying a clipping mask by right-clicking on them, and clipping mask will allow you to easily paint within the shape. So now what I'm going to do is my shadow. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come up to my color picker, and I'm going to pick a color that's a little bit darker. And then I'm going to grab my brush, and I'm going to situate my brush. So grab the brush tool. You're going to right click, You want that soft brush, 0% hardness. You probably want a bigger brush, right? You're making bigger sweeping motions. And then the other piece that you want is you don't want to just paint on a color. You want to gradually build up your values. So I'm going to change my opacity and I'm going to make it pretty soft down to anywhere between that 15 and the 20. So I've selected my brush. I've chosen a darker color and I've changed the size of my brush and made sure it's super soft, right? 0%, no harsh lines, and my opacity is around 20. Now, I'm going to click and drag, and again, circular motions to come in and start to build up my shadow area. And again, you can use the erase tool using the same brush, right? That soft brush, 0 hardness, a little bit bigger. And I can go in that 0% hardness. I'm sorry, the opacity down to say 20. You want it to be the same as your brush. And now you can start to create some soft edges with your eraser. So remember, you're applying some paint with the paintbrush, and you can use the eraser tool on that layer to soften that edge even more. Once I have some shadow in there, I'm going to go to my core shadow, and I can use the same one or I can go a little bit darker with color. And I'm going to go a little smaller with my brush. Probably going to go a little bigger, so I'm going to use my brackets on my keys. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to start to lay in some of the shadow. And remember, you can use this as the example, right, to follow. Doing that with color. And then I can use the eraser tool again to go in, soften some of the edges. Right? And you would continue to sort of work up that core shadow. Highlight, the same, except for now you're going to use white. So I'm going to switch my colors here and keeping my brush the same, right? That 0 hardness, a little bit of a larger brush. I can now go in that circular motion and add some values to make it lighter, right? Remember, our reflected light is what comes up off the surface it's sitting on. It's small and subtle, right? And then you would keep going between your layers and building things up sort of as you're working. Okay, my cast shadow, I'm going to just grab a darker sort of black tone more, maybe a little more green. Larger brush. Remember, this is going to allow you to really see that reflected light too as you're building this up. And there's your shadow. So the one thing I would suggest when you're applying color though is sometimes they can look a little flat with just a green or whatever tone. So I actually tend to add some complementary colors or some warm tones. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to do a clipping mask on it, and I'm going to call this color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a warm tone like an orange, yellow, and I'm going to add just a little bit. I'm going to even go a little bit less than 17. I'm going to do, and I'm going to add a little bit of warmth to it. I can also go into my shadows and make my shadows a little cooler. And that sort of adds some, either in my shadow or my color, And I'm just going to go in. And sometimes that just adds a little dimension to your colors, so it's not quite so flat. And you can kind of have fun with adding a little bit tint of color to your piece. And that's it. So again, practice with the brush. Try to make really soft transitions between your shadow, core shadow, highlight, reflected light, and into your cast shadow to create these really volumetric spheres. When you're done, make sure to save as both a PSD and export as a JPEG and attach it to the assignment to turn it in. Good luck!